Did your story, are you finished?
I'm done.
That was great. Thank you so much.
Hopefully I did it justice. She's a really good writer.
Yeah. Lindsay?
Yeah. So I know I didn't do it justice. So I might ask her if I can like post her writing because her words are, I don't know, better than how I told it, I think.
Mm-hmm. No, thank you so much. Shout out. And Lindsay's been listening for a while, so we appreciate you. That story reminded me of one that I've hesitated to tell for a while. Well, when I say a while, I mean
the whole
ever
time.
since we've started.
Like the podcast or this episode?
The podcast.
Interesting.
You two have heard it. I've shared it before. And I guess the reason why I hesitate sharing it is the same reason with the church kidnapping story. It's a mission story.
Oh, yeah. I remember this one.
I don't.
Well, good then.
Yeah.
This is going to be exciting.
So, real quick, if you're new, we're Mormon. We served Mormon missions 10 years ago. It's been a long time, bro. But that's actually where Sean and I met. We were in the Philippines. And religious opinions and notions and beliefs to the side, it was actually fun. At the very least, to get out and learn about other people's cultures, learn their language, trying to understand their stories. You know, it was just fun talking to people, and we were very appreciative of people who would open up to us. Two of my really good friends on the mission, one is named Tyler, one is named Earl. And if you've ever talked to Mormon missionaries, they do have a title, just like a teacher, Mr. and Mrs., your teacher in school. We were kind of the same, but with, teaching the gospel or our beliefs from our church. And our title for men was elder and then last name. Or if you were a girl missionary, it was sister and last name. So Tyler was Swicegood. He's from Denver. Good dude. Love that kid. Elder Swicegood. And then Earl, who's from the Philippines. Last name is Banzin. So Elder Banzin. So Elder Swicegood and Banzin, they were companions. If you see Mormon missionaries, you always see them in pairs. They work together. They study together. They just teach and do everything together. But I don't expect anybody to sympathize or even entirely believe anything we say.
Totally.
But I'm just telling you what I know or what I've experienced, or if in a lot of cases, these secondhand stories, what I've been told. So I'm just spitting out the facts. You can take it for whatever you want it to be. So this is both Elder Swicegood and Banzin telling me this story. I know them very well. Very good people. I trust them. And when they told me this story, I could feel and see in their eyes the authenticity of it. So they were working together, knocking on doors, not having much success, which is the norm for a missionary of any church. They are working their way up this hill. Obviously, the Philippines is a third world country. So there's no doors for a lot of these houses. They just kind of walk up to the entrance, and in the Philippines, you yell, "Ayo." Ayo. That's kind of like, "Hey, we're here." Ayo. Just kind of, that's their call to say, "Hey, I'm here. Is anyone home?" They're doing that. People aren't answering, or people are, and they are turning them away. As they're walking and trying to knock on these doors and trying to meet new people, they start getting closer to this house in which the children are telling them, "Don't go to that house over there." And they're pointing at it.
Say it in Cebuano.
Ayaw.
Ayaw mo tuk-tuk sa, what's house? Ayaw mo tuk-tuk sa balay diha. Like, don't knock on that house or that door over there.
Yeah.
So that instantly makes them want to go,
Okay, we'll skip the next 5 houses and go straight there.
So they get to this house and there's a gate around this house. And this house is like a cinder block house, the tin roof. And there's a curtain for the door. And they don't go through the gate because it's closed. The gate's made out of bamboo. So they stand at the gate, and the distance from the gate to the door is about 10 yards. They yell, "Ayo!" They can hear someone walking around inside as they approach it, but when they yelled "Ayo," it went silent. So they waited a little bit, thinking that, they heard them call out and they were going to come to the door and say something. Nothing. They yell "Ayo" again, and they kind of walk a little to the right of the entrance down the gate, and they can see that there's an old woman kind of behind the door or the entrance, and she's just kind of like peeking. And in the Philippines, if there's a woman who's older than you, you call her Nanay. That's kind of the title they have. So like, "Oh, Nanay, how are you?" They're talking to her, and we spoke Cebuano or Bisaya, which is a small dialect in the Philippines. But they call out to her, and she beckons unto them. She lifts her hand in the air, and she tells them to come. So they walk through the gate, turn around, close the gate, turn back around, and they're walking towards the house. And as they get closer, she's no longer at the entrance of the door. She's sitting down in a chair, and the chair's in the middle of the room. And as soon as they reach that point where they're at the entrance, no turning back to hide, she sees them. They see her sitting down in the middle of the room. She says in a perfect English accent, "I've been waiting for you, Earl and Tyler." Calls them by their first names.
Okay. Just so you guys know, if you haven't served a mission, you're not a member of Mormon. There's like a weird thing with missionaries. Your first name becomes kind of like secret almost. Like you don't use it. You don't really. Do you know what I mean?
You go by the title Elder. For me, I was Elder Pasikala.
And your last name.
For 2 years, that's all anybody called me.
So hardly anyone knows your first name out
That's
there.
all I introduced myself as. So even some of my best friends on the mission didn't know my first name. Everybody called each other by their last names. Like I said, I called them Swicegood and Banzin. So everyone did that in the missions. You all went by your last name.
So the fact that she calls them by their first names.
Nope.
Instant chills.
Nope.
Swicegood turns to Banzin and says, "Hey, I don't feel good. I think we should leave." Banzin says, "I don't feel good either. But let's see what we can do."
Damn it, Swicegood.
After they have that little exchange, she lifts up her hand and motions to them to come inside. So, what do? They go inside. And they sit down on her couch, and they begin to start a conversation with her, just asking her her name, where she's from, what she's up to.
How the hell do you know
today.
our names?
Trying to ignore that fact, She's not answering. Every time they ask her a question, nothing. So after doing that for a little while, a couple questions go by and no response. Swicegood bumps Banzin. "I really don't feel good about this." And Banzin says, "Maybe she's sick." Trying to give her the benefit of the doubt. Or just being an idiot, which he kind of is. I'm not going to lie. But I tell that to his face, so it's okay. He's one of my best friends. But he asks Nanay, "Okay, baka?" Like, "Are you okay?" And she replies in Cebuano, "Na ako'y sakit," which is, "I have a sickness." And Banzin continues with that. Takes the bait. And he says, "Unsay mong sakit? What's your sickness?" And her response was, "There's something telling me things." And if that wasn't creepy enough, she replied, not only in a different dialect, but in a different voice.
Like, what was it like? "There's something telling me things."
We're going to go with that. So both of them are feeling more uncomfortable for some odd reason, Benson still wants to reach out and try to help this, to him, poor woman.
Dumb for him. Good for us.
Good for us. Content, bro. Little did he know that we'd exist 10 years later. But he continues with this conversation and he asks, what are they telling you?
Oh, no. Dude, coming hard. Oh, my gosh.
You are dancing with the devil at this point. She replies, I know everything about you and your church and your temples. What goes on in the outside and in. Once again, if that was not creepy enough, she replies in another dialect and in another voice.
I have the strongest chills I've had since the beginning of this podcast. Could you just imagine, like, I'd be like, I would turn and run. I'd be like, F you. Good luck. F you. I'm going home.
So, that point, Banzan decides he wants to get out, but he wants to do one thing before he leaves. He wants to leave a blessing on her and the house. He whispers to Swicegood and says, I think we should give her a blessing and then we can go. Is that cool? Swicegood, super hesitant, but agrees. He says to Nanay, he says, Nanay, we're going to give you a blessing if that's okay with you. We believe this blessing can help. And it's basically like a prayer. So he starts to approach her and she's not saying anything. And he asks her again, can we give you a blessing? She's not really moving or saying anything. And he goes to put his hand on her shoulder to kind of rub her back or rub her arm and assure her that everything's going to be okay. And ask again if it would be all right to give her a blessing. And as he's reaching out to put his hand on her shoulder, her dead set eyes, that's fixed, just straight, not on anything in particular, but just straight ahead. Switch, blinks, and she looks at him. And she starts to twirl in her seat.
What do you mean twirl?
Her body starts moving in circles.
Just like this?
Yeah.
Okay.
And her head starts getting real loose. And right before Banzan touches her, he says, Nanay, are you okay? What's happening? And as she's circling around, all of the voices that spoke to him spoke in unison. And says, you cannot have her. You cannot take her. She is ours. So Banzan grabs her and he looks at Swicegood and says, help me. Swicegood, without even thinking, helps and grabs Nanay and they start to pray. And as they're holding her, her circular motions and her body motions are getting more violent. And she's screaming in what sounds like multiple voices. Yeah. Dude, there is like a huge knot or ball in my throat right now. But they are praying and they're just asking for heaven's help. At this point, they don't know what to do. Something beyond their power is here. And so they also need something else from the other side beyond their power to, fight this almost, from what they're telling me. This blessing goes on for maybe 20 seconds, 30 seconds, and it feels like hours, of course, as any intense situation would. But when they say the words amen, and they close their prayer, she stops. She immediately falls to the floor. When this happens, they hear voices behind them, and they turn around. And in all of this commotion, they had no idea, but the children that told them not to go to that house followed them. They don't know when they got to the entrance and the windows, but at this point, they were all looking and watching and saw this whole thing unfold, at least this very last part. and she's on the ground. This looks bad. 2 men in white shirts and ties.
And a knocked out grandma.
And a
Assaulting
knocked out
grandmas.
grandma on the floor. People watching outside the house. So they turn back around, focus their attention on Nanay, and they gently start to shake her. They say, Nanay, Nanay, wake up, are you okay? This goes on for another 30 seconds or so. And she slowly starts coming to her senses, struggling to open her eyes. And after a few minutes of this, with her regaining consciousness, she can't say anything except for Salama Jakayo, which is thank you very much, over and over again. There's not much that happened at that house that day. They never went back to that house. They felt like they did what they felt like they got everything they could have out of there, or didn't need to experience any much more after that, which is understandable. So they leave that house. How would you feel in that situation?
I don't know, drained,
Yeah.
overwhelmed.
Exhausted.
Yeah.
From what they were telling me, they were feeling pretty good. And the reason why is, if you look at this through a Mormon missionary's perspective, someone who, and I'm not putting them down, this is just like their paradigm, but someone who believes that they're almost like a soldier for God, you know, teaching his word, they think that they did a good thing.
I think the main mission of a missionary is to help others in any way.
Mm-hmm.
And surprisingly, that can be very difficult because a lot of people just don't want any type of help, no matter what help. So anytime you can help someone on the mission, you just feel like you're fulfilling your purpose.
Yeah. That was the main purpose for missionaries, to help others. And that didn't even have to be through teaching about our church. That could be helping somebody to weed their yard, and that's it.
I mowed 4,000 lawns on my mission. Every Saturday we did 8 lawns.
There was a time on my mission where the area I was working in, nobody wanted to hear anything about what we had to say. Everyone was rejecting us.
Mm-hmm.
And I was feeling pretty down. But from their perspective, it makes sense, you know? Like, I don't talk to anybody who knocks on my door.
I feel, yeah.
So,
no knock on anyone who doesn't, like, you know.
yeah, no, exactly. But there was a point where I changed my pitch to, do you have anything I can do, like, for you around the house? Which Filipinos were very open to that. So if it was like like I said, helping to weed, I did that a lot. You know, I was like, give me a spoon and I'll start weeding your yard, and that's it. I'll leave it at that. You know, that was the least I could do then. I don't know. But I'm not trying to paint ourselves as like the perfect people, because we weren't. But that's what the purpose of any missionary was. They're good and bad missionaries. Anyway, so they're feeling good about themselves. They go home. The next day is what's called P-Day. And for Mormon missionaries, P-Day is the best, because it's the one day where you get to email home, talk to your family.
And play some sport or something.
Play some sport. Have an activity, because all the other days you're studying, you're teaching, you're helping people.
All day long.
Yeah. P-Day stands for preparation day. So you do the things you need to do: grocery shop, wash your clothes, so you're you're prepared for the rest of the week. Usually, at least in our mission, the night before P-Day, the missionaries would all sleep at one person's house, one of the companionship's house. And we'd just hang out. We'd bring food, play card games.
Dodgy boys.
And this was the case. So that day they had that experience with Nanay was the day before P-Day. So they're feeling good. And the only thing they can think of is, man, this is a great story. Wait till everyone else, you know, reacts to what we just went through and we tell them. So they meet up with everybody that night, and they're all hanging out in the room, and curfew is at 10:30. They're staying up a little later than usual. One of the missionaries in that district, that we call it district, one of the missionaries in that district is very good. And
he was very concerned about keeping every rule.
Yeah, very concerned about keeping every rule. So he's sleeping already, while everyone else is just hanging out, playing music, playing games. And they're, for some reason, they're all in one room. If I remember correctly, I think it's because that one room had air conditioning.
Sounds
But
about right.
this elder,
Erukan.
yeah, aircon. This missionary is knocked out. He's been knocked out for a while, and he seems to sleep through all of their, activities, everything like that, the music,
Yelling, laughing.
Yeah.
Shenanigans.
Yeah. And they start to tell their story about their Nanay. They're being really prideful about it.
Yeah, bro, we walked in there, slapped that demon.
They were calling themselves the demon slayers.
Oh my god.
So,
Holy crap.
so as they're telling this story, a lot of the missionaries are freaking out. Some of them are not believing them one bit. People are all across the board. But at the height of this story, when they say, we gave her a blessing, casted out the demon, and they're super embellishing it. They're saying all the kids were outside and they were cheering. The elder that was sleeping sits straight up. Everyone looks because he has been dead asleep.
It's like, boom, up in his bed.
Looks at all of them and says, I don't know what you're doing or what's going on, but whatever it is, I think we should stop. At that moment, they all start laughing at him.
Haha, nerd.
They start laughing at him, and in the middle of their laughter, the one wardrobe in their room starts to shake violently. The doors of it start rattling and banging. And after about 5 to 10 seconds of this, everyone's attention is towards the wardrobe. The doors of it open and shut. Open and shut. That point, all the missionaries, scared out of their mind, huddle together in a circle on their knees and start to pray
For forgiveness.
for forgiveness. As they're praying, this rattling from the wardrobe starts to slow down, settle down, and finally stops. And this tense, tight feeling that they all felt in their chest stays with them throughout the night. But after that night, Swastika and Banzan told me this story on different accounts, but with very little variation.
And did their attitude change?
And their attitude did change. They weren't super somber about it, but they told it kind of in the way I'm telling you now, like this is what happened. But
Just matter of fact, like.
yeah. So I don't know if you want to take that, you can leave it, but that's what we're setting out there.
Yeah.
But your wardrobe story very, very much reminded me of that.
You hadn't heard that before? I could have sworn you've told that one before.
It sounds like a dream I've had. Like, I can kind of remember, like I could almost guess what was coming because I probably have heard it before. But I don't really remember that. That was a banger.
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. Thanks for indulging me in that again. It's been a while since I've told that. It's funny because I had another story to share.
Ooh.
But I think we'll call it good this week, at least for me.
Dang. Okay.
So I'll put those in the bag and save them for next time.
Nice. We're excited.